Hi everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this launch. I'm going to do that awkward minute or so while we wait for people to join and get settled. Thank you for choosing to spend your evening with us, though, to celebrate Daughter of the Sun, which I have in front of me here. I hope you do too already. I'll post a link later if you haven't. And do say hello in the chat box if you are attached to your keyboard. It's always nice to get a sense of who's here and where you're watching from as well. I'm coming to you from the Emma Press office in Birmingham. As I've shown the other panelists, I turned askew so you can't see all the boxes and rubbish. But here we are. Oh, Emma Wright is here. That's very nice. In Halifax, Vicky Gatehouse in London. Nick, hi. From Cape Town. I thought we might be international because of Rachel's multiple places that she has laid her hat. That's very exciting. And use the chat throughout and these reaction buttons as well. A lot of people like to do that when people are reading. Yeah, it's really nice to hear what you think. And hello, Kathy Bimlock from Covent Garden. We've got a couple of readings tonight, but I hope there's time to ask some questions as well at the end. So please do feel free to put them in and I'll do the job of scrolling back. So drop them in when you think of them and we can have a bit of time for that at the end. Rachel, I think you'll need to change who you're writing to everyone rather than host and panelist. Because I think just me and Jean saw your nice message. Anyway, I'll get started while you're doing that. I think people have slowed down coming in. Welcome officially to the launch of Daughter of the Sun by Rachel Spence. Putting it here, my name is James. I'm the director of the Emma Press, publishers of this wonderful book of poems. I was also very happy to be its editor too, so really delighted to join you tonight. In case you don't know about us, the Emma Press, we are Birmingham based, as I said. We're a publisher of poetry and prose, and we were founded in 2012 by Emma Diane Wright, who I can see is in the chat, with the aim of making literature and publishing as welcoming and as accessible as possible. For writers in the room, I like to always say that we have open submissions twice a year. Feels a little cruel to mention it now because we closed that last week, but we will be open again in August around then. And we publish about 8 to 10 books a year. We're absolutely thrilled that our first book of 2025 is this full poetry collection from Rachel. Daughter of the Sun is actually only our second ever full-length poetry collection after, I think, 60 pamphlets now, and our first from a UK-based author. I should say it worked a little differently to our usual way of finding books through our open submissions. In fact, we published Rachel's pamphlet Call and Response in 2020, in March 2020, which had a few other things going on. And as Rachel was just saying before, she was a pioneer of the Zoom launches. So expect big things in a moment when she's on. One of the very first Zoom launches that were held was for Call and Response, which was a very short and incredibly impactful sonnet series on Rachel's relationship with her mum and caring for her through an illness. And a few years after that pamphlet, Rachel got in touch with more poems, a continuation of that sonnet series, exploring the even more impactful themes of family and reconnection, and sadly, ultimately grief and loss and possibilities of healing. Rachel also sent this alongside a second stunning long poem sequence, reimagining the myth of Medea. And we thought all these poems, while being very sort of two separate entities and styles, worked brilliantly to explore different types of mothers. A very personal one, obviously, and a mythological one, to get us thinking about, it got us thinking about their kind of our orbits around mothers and their influence on us, and particularly, I suppose, their influence on daughters. We read a lot of poems about being a mother in our submissions, certainly over the last couple of years. Something that stood out to us in this was that exploration of being a daughter and trying to understand an unknowable parent and the things they do, I suppose. But to quit my talking, fast forward to now, February 2025, we're delighted to be launching this book online. Split into two parts, as I know Rachel will talk about, and read from both, but cut through with really similar concerns and parallel imagery across time and nature, and myth, and reality, I suppose. Right, so over the next 45 minutes or so, delighted to say Rachel's with us to read and talk about the book. We've also got a special guest reader, Jean Atkin, to share some of her work for us and help us celebrate Daughter of the Sun. Before that, I wanted to get straight to it though, and get Rachel up if you want to come on camera straight away. Always like to sort of start by sharing a poem and maybe just saying a few words. First, I guess, massive congratulations from us and a thank you for sending us this work and trusting us with it. You sent it to Emma, I think, before I saw the manuscript. So since I've talked about those two sections, did you always feel like they kind of belonged together? Or was it something you decided in later edits or chats with other writers or Emma, in fact?
That's a really good question. I originally thought that the long poem about Medea would maybe be a pamphlet. It wasn't long enough to be its own collection. But then I was also writing all these sonnets about and to my mother. And at a certain point, I just thought I've got two long sequences about motherhood, and it's kind of other, and there's not really a word for what it means not to be a mother. And I'll talk more about Medea when I read from Medea's song. But the Medea, I imagine, never had any children. So there's something there about the unothered mother rather than an unmother. But yeah, and once I thought of putting them together and I suggested it to a couple of people and they said, yeah, do that. They're kind of like mirrors. And I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to everyone at Emma Press. Emma's design for this book is so beautiful. It's more than I could have imagined. It was equally beautiful for call and response. And working with James and Georgia and Perry has been an absolute joy from beginning to end. I'm going to read one poem. Also, and thank you to Jean. Jean, thank you so much for being here. It's a real joy to share this with you. I'm going to read one poem from Daughter of the Sun, and it's the first poem in the new sequence that follows on from call and response. And it was a moment when my mother was essentially in remission, and it was a very happy time. Late May 2020. You in your garden, resisting lockdown, beneath a thatch of birdsong, bristling with escapee coos, fugitive whistles. Your feral spirit bursting through coup d'etat of foxgloves, monkshood, salvia, the colour of pomegranates, held by Christ children. Their mothers gazing forward to the Passion. So once you gazed at me, so now I know. Let's retell. My Madonna is a fighter, rejecting dead men's histories, watching lemon light on sapling birches, the golden moss of bumblebees, their delicate, obsessive turning, learning to count time as grains that whirl, not flow, spinning us back to love's defiant zero.
Lovely, a lovely place to start. We're going to hear from Jean next. Oh, Rachel, I wanted to keep you on quickly and ask you if that's all right.
I'll stay on there.
I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I was just going to ask you why you asked Jean in particular to read tonight.
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that. Gosh, so many reasons. Jean is a wonderful poet, and a wonderful human being. Actually, that's kind of it, really. She's a wonderful poet and a wonderful human being. She's based in Shropshire, and she's kind of become my kind of poetry comrade in Shropshire in many ways. But really, yeah, just she's, I can't think of anyone I would rather read with ever. So thank you, Jean, for being here.
That's just lovely, Rachel. Thank you. The opportunity.
That's one of the best answers to that question I've had. It's very nice. To embarrass you further, Jean, I'm going to read your bio, if that's okay, just so everyone is aware who you are. Regretting coming on camera too soon? Yeah, I don't know, maybe you are.
I'm here now.
Yeah. Jean Atkin is a poet, writer and educator based in Shropshire. Her third collection, High Nowhere, was published by IDP in 2023 and nominated for the Laurel Prize. Her work is featured on Radio 4's Ramblings with Claire Balding and appeared recently in the Rialto, The Moth, Lighthouse and Magma. In December 2024, she was one of the winners, that's very recently, of the Coast to Coast to Coast Individual Poet Journal Prize, which will see a winning pamphlet published this year. And her recent collaboration with Richard Skinner, Crossing Paths, is a book of poems about walking, place, nomenclature and nature, and will be published by Black Cat Press in 2026. Jean, take it away.
Thank you very much. That's really kind. I'm going to read to you from read just a few poems from High Nowhere. I invented High Nowhere as a kind of place name which stands for everything that's at stake, and also because High Nowhere is effectively everywhere that we're paying attention. Okay, so off we go. In High Nowhere now, the chiff-chaff calls, sap leaps, and our red soil leans into south. A din of rooks descends the air to strut as black as beetles. The tatty wood lets out its rusted ghost of parish tip, ramshackles down the bank, wild garlic leaves to cover it. So that's a poem about spring, and it's about a wood just 15 miles north of where I live, just still in Shropshire. But the book takes us also, the core of this book is about a journey I made in Iceland in 2021. So I'm going to read you just two poems from that experience. And believe me, if everywhere is high nowhere, then Iceland is a bit more high nowhere than most places. This is about driving under the volcano Hekla along the south coast of Iceland. Hekla. Still miles from the crater, we lose the tarmac. For 2 hours we are condemned to drive on washboard pumice. We see how Hekla is an upturned boat, her cratered keel an offering to north. My pencil skates on the jerking page of my notebook. I think how Hekla's centuries rained volcanic ash, smothered grass outright, sent sheep bolting in terror, snagged farms in torrents of lava, shifted whole hillsides in terrible noise. How the fish boiled in the rivers and the mountain's ice was wholly melted. How at times people observed birds both large and small, they said, flying in the mountain's fire. and took them to be souls. Iceland has a wonderful folklore, and while we were there, I was very taken with the stories of modern roads being removed along to make room for the trolls, because you must not, you know, pester the trolls. And on one occasion, it's fair to say, we saw a troll, and there are photographs in High Nowhere, and you may just be able to see here is quite clearly a troll. So this is the troll. Troll. Inland of the black ash plains and grazing horses, by the long crumpled fields of lava, the trolls walk in darkness to measure the land, squelch its names into its floods, turn their arses to its rain. Crouched on scarps they lurk the hairy night, and now and then one fatally mistimes the dawn, stiffens into stone. And a poem from Scotland, where I lived for quite a long time, many years. This is from the Solway coast, a beautiful south-facing shore, and here there is salt marsh, and lots of birds. It's called Bird Weather. Water drawn, like so much else, you cut your engine to long quiet of Merse. Pick up first distant yammer of the geese. Starlings blow like passing rain, wet leaves and petrel feathers shine. A curlew maps the grass-deep lane. Scots pine, wind blasted, twisted, holds. The side slip, dip glide, dark of crows. You observe sunlit, bent grass, mouse holes. You know, out there is sea, its low roar ceaseless. Know in the mud, spring thrilling, waking northbound geese. And lastly, this is a very scientific poem, it's all correct. In owl pen, a spider came out of an egg. Her night was yellow and great with the moon. She felt grass grow past her folded legs. When her carapace dried towards dawn, she crept on the earth of Owlpen Wood. All morning she clambered an oak. She was limber and hard to the fresh white sky. She waited for the breath of her god or the planet. She trailed her thread, a hook for the breeze. In Owlpen, a spider flew over the land. No one saw where she went on the wind. No one heard her set down on a dock and start spinning her life to the wolds. Her webs tie the lambs to the soil. She'll roll up her life like their wool. Build the softest nest for her eggs and leave us a thread through winter. In Owlpen, a spider came out of an egg. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Jean. That was fantastic. And echo, Rachel, that did feel like the most perfect opening reading. And nature, Shropshire, myth, bit of science. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to Rachel. We'll have a reading and then we're going to finish off with some questions. So yeah, as I say, drop some in the chat if you have some. And I lots of you know Rachel, but I will read her biography as well, just in case you're new to her. Rachel Spence lives in London, Ludlow, and Venice. She's published 3 pamphlets: Furies, Call and Response, and Uncalendared. Her debut collection, Bird of Sorrow, came out with Templar and was highly commended in the 2019 Forward Prize. Her prose poem, Venice Unclocked, in collaboration with photographer Giacomo Cosua, was published by Ivory Press. Her non-fiction book, Battle for the Museum, which explores the relationship between art, power, and money, was published last year. And we're delighted to say her latest poetry collection, Daughter of the Sun, is out now. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, James. And thank you, Jean. That was even more gorgeous than I thought it would be. Really, you just transport us to your landscapes. Kind of don't want to come back, but I do, because it's really nice to be here with all of you. I'm going to just read a few more of the sonnets, the new sonnets that I wrote as my mum fell ill again and passed. This first one was written at exactly this time of year. Hinge week, between equinox and change of hour, waking to blue, the colour of stained glass, tibia of plum, persimmon, dawn as free gift, uncalendared. By day, I watch you sleep, summoning your breath like a snake charmer, the terrier curled on your chest like a conch, her tiny body rising and falling with the ridge and furrow of your rib cage. On the edge of a black hole, time stands still, but the hands of the clock in the Jewish quarter go to left from right, and we too choose to live slowly backwards, not borrowed time, but earned. But my mother passed about 3 months later in June 2021, and I started swimming in the river in Ludlow where she lived. And that became a really important way of navigating grief. 8:24 a.m., 18th of July, 2021, Ludlow. Levee days, unleavened. I remember swimming, untrellised by heat, octaves of dog roses, damselflies stapling the reeds. At this hour, the river a convent of untamed women with unshamed bodies. Below the weir, the current counts us down, but we prefer to go in from above. The water still as a stopped clock. Coil time, wishless as kisses, last breath, breathless. Did you see the kingfishers? No, I was talking to you. 3 passed right above your head. I don't care. Your blue is more brilliant than any waterbirds. It's getting hard now. But the midges are friendly. They cling to me. I'm going to read one more of the sonnets. It's the last one. "8:09 a.m., December 21st, 2022, Ludlow. Rip-rap days, unbreached. 18 months without you, and we're closer than we've ever been. The river in full spate, ransacking the bank for twigs, leaves, sewage bubbles. 500 million years ago, this county lay under a shallow sea. On Wenlock Edge, the limestones nurture coral. These days, we understand the fury of deep time. Sometimes I see egrets capstoning the weir, bewildered by what we've done to weather. Sometimes Papa gets sick. Sometimes I do see otters, somersault of muddy silk, whiplash of tail quilled in cloudy ink. Sometimes I think we're done. For now, the team keeps mum. Thank you. So now I'm going to read a poem that's not actually in the collection. I wrote it this last October, and I think Chris Kinsey is here. Hi, Chris. I wrote it on her. She ran a beautiful workshop in the Shropshire countryside, and also commented on it and improved it a lot. If I had written it in time, I would have tried to include it in the acknowledgements. It's called Sovereign, and it turns on a line by Seamus Heaney, which is be adept, be dialect. October, noonish. The day without a vertebra, infinitely supple. Herb Robert in the sunlit Shropshire hedgerow. A small pink flower named after a king, but sometimes stinking bob, crowsfoot, fox geranium, squinter pip, and death comes quickly. You have more names than petals, your dialect. But I come from a people always on the run. My grandmother washed my vowels snow white as royal icing. Palestine, I see you, your poets turning war reporters, your flowers with their names that sing of home, of motherland. So now I'm going to read some of the poems in Medea's song. I kind of think of Medea's song as one long poem, but I think and hope the poems also work individually. So just very briefly, I was always fascinated by the figure of Medea. My mother used to take me to see the Greek tragedy where Medea kills her own children in revenge for her husband's betrayal with another woman, and you can make of that what you will. But I found Medea kind of transcendent. She was so angry and she was so clever. She got all the best lines, and she exits the play in a chariot pulled by dragons. She does this terrible thing, but she doesn't really get punished. And it was as if she had escaped kind of her own myth. So she was always there in my head. And in the end, I developed this idea around Medea, which is almost just a sort of gesture. It's not a certainty, that maybe she didn't have children and maybe she wasn't a witch. They said she was a witch, and that she helped her lover, Jason, steal the golden fleece using her magic. So I thought maybe she's not a witch and maybe she never had any children, but maybe she was a quantum physicist where time and space kind of bend, and Einstein described quantum physics as a form of witchery. And actually another early scientist, Kepler, his mother was tried for witchcraft. So, it's not as crazy as it sounds. But really, I just wanted to write a poem about a female figure who somehow evaded so many of the different structures that are hard to evade. So this is a bit of Medea's song. There is a place with names for the wind. It is dawn. She remembers anvils, women running to beat the tide, palaces crumbling into feathers. The first time she noticed light, headlands swaddled in mist, bandages puddled in a basin, estuary of brighter matter. She remembers spindles, unsayable time. She will be unmapped, unread, unnumbered, and untelling. What was unsaid? How much she loved the sea. That first journey on the Argo, rising before dawn, the water stirring as if an animal is trapped beneath its folds. Cupped in the stern's curve, the sailors numb to her, as if they know out here she scoured of all she was. Daughter, sister, princess, witch. She's no one's bride to be. Out here, there's only newness, ferrous tongue of sea and sky, trembling, fibrous. You watch and watch, but morning's shy as flowers. They're opening an inward turn, unscrolling of the mind's eye. This is God's work. And yet, as dawn breaks pieces of infinity over the Argo's sails, she feels the shudder of a different knowing. Is that the scissor kick of gulls' wings, or just a trick of the light? She will land on the other side of outrage, beyond murder, sacrifice, way beyond revenge. Others have come before her, and others will follow. Not all will be seen, but all will see each other, across epochs, galaxies, light years, archives. Do not call them seers or sisters. They are the owls of history, night flyers, outliers, wing beats so slow they unhinge time, a quantum swiftness, porous as ash. They'll teach us to see in the dark. What was unsaid? How much she hated witchcraft. Dispatched to Hecate before first bleed, she learnt to read the landscape's private light, dark, wet, metallic, fog like wire wool, acne of pebbles on the littoral, those coffin trees, her tutor's belfry smile at snuffing out a daughter of the sun, always low tide. How much she envied Thetis, her body like a breeze or dream, salty, kelp-eyed, soluble as photons, always swimming in and out of other people's stories. What no one told her, that women are loved for listening, that love is like space, smooth from above, but when you're close, it shatters and foams. This is the weave of the world, mesh froth, mephoi, minute in its particulars, undone, gone, no, zero, oh. What she was taught. The stars are dead. Time bends. There are planets where she is still at home, watching darkness hold shimmer like water. Granular flicker, as if there was a veil between herself and her. They pointed up to heaven and told her she would see remnants of light left over from the Big Bang, creation's chaff. But she was watching the lavender haunches of the sea, rolling out time like dough, thin, thinner. The wooden board shines through, its grainy, unwashed gold. Herb smells, green spells, skin that had never seen light, thorns so sharp, the air itself grows brittle. Nothing is pliant. Sieve more, douse more. Her mother's absent, barely worth a line. She gave Medea beauty, tin-skinned and thinned, algorithm for privacy, sang lullabies she'd learnt from naiads. Sometimes she scored the planets into octaves, click, click, on her abacus, her ear tuned to the reedy arias of the void, its boneless harmony. Jason did nothing, save let her cross the lintel of his smile and beg for pharmacons. But nights with no vernacular, unrecorded, he asked so little. Latch days, scrubbed out, a world where women managed water and still dishonor was survival's twin. But she remembers almond blossom, molting through her father's hands, the milk of someone's voice at twilight, wave, all, vitreous wind. Do I not have children? Do I not? I not do. I do not. Do I not? I not. Do I not? Do I not? I not do. I do not do. I not. I not do. I do not. Thank you.
No, thanks, Rachel. That was brilliant. Never knew how you'd read that last poem. It's lovely to hear it in your voice. And I think hearing the poem, the Medea song, as a kind of singular piece, you kind of got a lot of the like spell of it. Really, it's like an incantation. It's, yeah, really fantastic. Where are we at? 22. So we've got some time for questions, and there's some lovely reactions in the chat. Luminous is a great word. That's exactly what I felt as well. Yeah, feel free to put some questions in. I've got a few that I was going to bring up. Also, especially one I'll start with because I'd forgotten that they were in both parts of the poems. These the water words that you've got, and there's a glossary in the back of these words. Swale and salt marsh and riprap that start the poems at the end of your call and response sonnets. Yeah, I just wanted to know where you found them and why you wanted to use them in the poems.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Well, I've always loved water. I've always been a water person. I'm a Cancer, you know, all that. Always loved swimming. When I started swimming in the river, it kind of was transformative, and I felt for the first time connected to a landscape. And I realized I didn't know much about water. You know, I didn't know much about its science. I didn't know much about its history. So I read a book actually called How to Read Water by a naturalist called Tristan Gooley. He's an amazing writer because he kind of takes aspects of landscape like trees, water. Can't think of another one that he's done. I know he's done more than that. And he just kind of packs it full of information about how water behaves, in different places. It's a sort of, it's almost like a kind of, not encyclopedia, I think I want to say compendia, is that what I mean, of water. So a lot of those words came from there, just because they were words I didn't know, and I had to keep looking them up. And I love finding new words, and because they kind of open your mind up and take you to different places. So when I was writing the poems, I can't remember how the first one came to me. I think I was already doing this thing of saying days. So I was thinking ledge days, hinge days. And then I had this lovely new watery vocabulary, and it just seemed perfect for starting the sonnets about the river. And I didn't think about it very much. So, I mean, I now know that a skerry is something that a sort of island, or it's a patch of land which goes, you can see it when the tide is low, and then it goes down with the tide. But I don't think I knew that when I first wrote. There's one called Skerry Days, or Scary Nights, I think. But then, oddly enough, when I read them back, I realized there was a reason why I used the word scary. So I really like that thing where your unconscious is sort of ahead of you. And it's one of the reasons that I like using quite like odd words sometimes, in a way that I really hope isn't surreal, because I think there is a sort of unconscious sort of logic, if you like. So yeah, so they just kind of would, but sometimes I mean, thalweg means the middle of a river. It's like the seam in the middle of a river. It's usually the deepest part. And I love that. I love the word, but also that was the moment of like going into, I suppose, grief, or you know, where you start going very deep, and it felt like you were right in the thalweg of it. But I find water, I mean, what I like about water is that it tends to flow, and I find the idea of flowing through life much more kind of sympathetic than kind of other ways of moving through life, or being paralyzed. So I think there's that as well.
Well, they're lovely though. It's I definitely don't think they're surreal, and so for me they were quite the opposite. Sort of really grounding and opening these poems in a reality of just words that we're unfamiliar with. And yeah, as poets and fans of poetry, isn't it brilliant? It's hearing and reading new words that you weren't familiar with that bring new meaning to things. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. I'll ask one more because it came up to me then, the idea of you're researching, reading books about water words, and I wondered if that came through in the Medea song as well, with the kind of quantum physicist action. I don't want to get too much into quantum physics because I will be lost very quickly, but is that something you've had a sort of personal interest in, or is it because of Medea and this image that you had of her that you sought that out?
Quantum physics. So quantum physics, I had no interest in at all until I picked up a book by Carlo Rovelli, who is this fantastic Italian. He's a quantum physicist, but he's also the most beautiful writer. And by chance, I picked up a book of his called 7 Brief Lessons on Physics. And it captivated me because of the quality of the writing. He writes like a poet, like a poetic prose writer. And suddenly because he wrote so beautifully, I could kind of follow him. And he opened up this world, the quantum world, which, I mean, and probably there's lots of people, you know, with us tonight who know more about this than I do, because I never even got a physics O level. I got thrown out of my physics classes for being disruptive, which may also be like telling, I suppose. But yeah, he opened up this world where nothing does quite what sort of, you know, Newtonian logic expects it to, where time is not linear, where space is not kind of an empty box, where it's curved and kind of sort of doubles back on itself and is kind of, you can't be outside it, you're kind of in it, and you're also it, as far as I can make out. All of which just made me feel, more than anything, incredibly free. I think in a world where we feel increasingly kind of hemmed in, both, you know, politically and personally, psychologically, there is something about delving into the quantum world that makes me feel free. and that there is another world going on sort of underneath out there. We can't see it because it's usually too small, but it's kind of oblivious to us in a way. And even though we use it for all kinds of things like computers, and so I think it was partly the beauty of his writing, and partly that when I started to understand a little bit of what he was saying, I saw a space for kind of liberty. And then that started to tie into Medea, because I had always seen her as essentially this kind of creature of freedom, who escaped, who liberated herself even from a kind of Greek patriarchal myth makers. And so those two things started to talk to each other. But the quantum, I mean, I'm not, my quantum knowledge is, less than zero. I use the texts, I steal metaphor from them, I steal kind of concepts, I steal ideas, but I would still fail my physics O level, definitely. I think it's literally poetic license.
That's cool. I think your Medea would have been thrown out of her physics classes as well for being disruptive. I think that links quite well to to a question in the chat actually from Robert, in terms, well, potentially does in terms of the way you're talking about it being freeing. He said the form of the Medea poems feels very different to the sonnet form that you've used for your mother poems. What were the attractions of both forms for you in relation to the subjects?
Thank you for asking that, Robert. You're such a great formalist yourself. Well, the sonnets is a really easy answer. So when I wrote Call and Response, I originally wrote it in free verse. I didn't think I would ever publish it because they're poems with a lot of darkness as well as light about my relationship with my mother, which was full of dark and light, which is so familiar for many mothers and daughters, I think. When I realized I did want to try and publish it, I chose sonnets because they've always been used traditionally as love poems, with Shakespeare and Petrarch. And I thought, if I use a form which has so often been used as a love poem, perhaps it will kind of keep me in the light, is what I thought. It will keep me in a space of love, even when the words sometimes seem critical. And it was extraordinary because that seemed to work, because before I published Call and Response, I showed them to my mother, because I couldn't have published them if she had not liked them. And Emma had accepted them. And so I was, obviously desperate to publish them, but I knew that it was impossible to do it if my mother didn't like them. And she absolutely loved them. And I have to say, kudos to her. She understood that these were essentially love poems. And because she was a big-hearted, kind of brave woman, she was not at all disturbed by the fact that there is also quite a lot of conflict in them. So that's the sonnets. As far as Medea's song, the free verse, it was I had written a poem in Bird of Sorrow. I wrote two poems in the two title poems of Bird of Sorrow, one of which, the second one, I actually called, it didn't make it into it's in the index. It's called Bird of Sorrow, Medea's Song, in the index. And it's got this kind of format, if you can see it. So there's a lot of space, there's a lot of emptiness. And that poem was the seed of Medea's song, the long poem, because I knew I wanted to stay with that voice and this Medea-like figure who was starting to kind of come to me. And because I see Medea as a creature of freedom, and probably as a bird, in some ways, and that links to Bird of Sorrow, I wanted there to be space, as if she was kind of flying through the pages, and hopefully the readers get a sense of flying too. I think birds, there's a wonderful essay by John Berger about birds still having freedom, when I think it's an essay about Palestine, when people are constrained on the ground. And so so a lot of the poems in Medea's song, their form was me trying to create space and silence within the lines, but obviously at the same time keep a kind of momentum. And a friend of mine the other day, I was so pleased, Sophie, she said these poems ricochet and hurtle as if they're kind of shuttling, and I love that, and that's exactly what I wanted them to do. So yeah.
Yeah, they really do. I don't know if everyone's got the collection yet, but you can see the Medea song, typeset by Emma, so nicely is going across the page in wonderful ways. Thank you, Jean. And another link to Jean's birds, beautiful bird poems as well. Oh, and there's a bird reference here as well. So let's move to Laura's question, which is another thing I was going to ask about, was time. Laura puts it better, I think. Your way of rendering time is extraordinary, which it is. She picked out a couple of lines. Wing beats so slow they unhinge time. Rolled out time like dough. Yeah, there's lots of images of time and playing with time and thinking about time in the poems. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Another wonderful poet. So nice that you're here as well. Yeah, well, I am, I think, increasingly occupied with time, as I think many of us are. I think one of the things about the quantum world was that it shows you that there is another dimension where linear time doesn't exist. And I do find that, as I said, extremely liberating. And I think in a world where the digital realm helps to make us feel so rushed and kind of time is so compressed. And I'm always looking for spaces where I feel time opens out and slows. And I think that poem, the first poem I read, Hinge Week, and I talk about the hands of the clock in the Jewish quarter go from left to right. And that's actually, it is referenced in the book. That's a line from a poem by Apollinaire that was translated by Beckett. And the second line, and we too choose to live slowly backward, comes from the same poem. And I think when I read that, it kind of encapsulated something for me, was I would like to also live backwards. And of course, when somebody you love is dying, all you want is to stop time. And there are moments when you feel that seems to happen. And so I think, you know, being with my mother, and we had this long spring where she was well, we knew she was dying, but she was well. And I just stayed with her, and we just hung out together, often in her bedroom. And then sometimes I went to the river, and that was another space where I felt time seemed to slow and flow. And, you know, it was a very precious time. And I was so grateful to have, you know, because also time is political, time is economic, you know, if you're trying to just put bread on the table, you can't afford to slow time. So I had this moment with my mother where I was able to do that. And then I think with Medea's song, I can't remember, well, I wrote Medea's song before I wrote the sonnets, actually. So I think that's quite interesting. I finished Medea's song in 2019, and it was such a strange poem. I didn't know what to do with it. And I just sort of sat on it and kind of messed about with it. But I think Medea's song, writing it took about 2 years to write. It really got me into this space of kind of unhinged time. And yeah, and I just do read a lot still. I still reread Carlo Rovelli a lot, because the more I read him, the more I feel this sense of time is no longer my enemy. It's kind of my friend.
I'm feeling like that was such a powerful answer that might be a very nice place to end, and to pick up on time that it was certainly very impactful for us to see the second half, and the continuation of the call and response poems, which are so beautiful. And to be joined by Medea songs has been a real joy. People have picked out lots of beautiful lines from the poems, so I will share the chat with you. I'm imagining you've not been scrolling through, Rachel, but thank you so much for that. I guess we didn't all expect to have compendiums of water words and quantum physics and time, big time discussions on a Thursday night. But thank you very much for joining us. I will just do a few things before we go. In case you haven't got the book, I'll put a link to it in the chat, where you can buy it from our website. The other link I always do is, if you'd like this, like Rachel's work, and like to know more about the Emma Press or the things we do, or a writer, then please do sign up to our newsletter. We don't send many, but it's a nice way to tell you about what we're doing. And I'll just finish by thanking Rachel again for trusting us with your work and for sharing it with us tonight, and to Jean for that brilliant supporting reading, and sounds like being a brilliant supportive writer as well. And thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. We'll fade off into the background.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.